Hello and welcome to another edition of Professor Speaks. My name is Alex Hernandez. Alongside me as always is Dr. Craig Stern. And today we're going to be talking about some current events. One that happened was the House just passed a bill. It's a new tax bill that they have. And the idea is it's supposed to make way for the Senate bill, which is supposed to include an individual or repealing the individual mandate for the ACA to make some more room for all these funds, for all these tax cuts. So first question I'm going to ask is, what is this individual mandate?
Yeah, thank you, Alex. Let's try and answer this without dealing with this political back and forth. We're not taking a position here. We're trying to understand what's going on and what the issues are, and then everybody can come up with in Congress what they're going to do. The individual mandate was part of the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act, commonly known as Obamacare, is there because of an insurance issue.
Right.
The insurance issue is, in its simplicity, everybody puts money in and a few people take money out. Right. It's called the law of large numbers. It's fundamental in all insurance. Well, the issue was, how are you going to ensure that everybody has insurance? Because there was 47 million people that didn't have insurance before the Affordable Care Act. And then how are you going to get it paid for?
Right.
The guaranteed mandate, guaranteed issue was that everybody would be covered. Everybody would be included. A few would take money out, but everybody would be included. That meant that everybody who was an adult, 20, 21 years old and older, would be included.
Right.
Now, as the Affordable Care Act was implemented, about 2/3 of all of the individuals that were covered across the United States, about 2/3 of them, this worked fine.
Right.
About 1/3 of them, it didn't work. And so clearly there were issues with people not being able to afford it, people not being able to be addressed under it, etc. And in order to accommodate that, the Affordable Care Act, and by the way, totally separate from the Affordable Care Act, it's true with regard to Medicare and Medicaid in the different states, etc. There are subsidies in the Affordable Care Act to pay for people who can't afford it.
Right.
And in totally separate from the Affordable Care Act, there has always been some issue where people who can't afford it, who are less than 134% of the federal poverty level, in some cases less than 150% of the federal poverty level, they get relief in some way, whether it's a subsidy or not.
Right.
And so that has been fundamental to all healthcare insurance. In other countries, it doesn't matter because it's part of their Social Security Act and everybody is covered so that they know that they're effectively dealing with everyone. But in this case, in the United States, we're dealing with that kind of an issue.
Right. So this individual mandate and them repealing it, why is it so important for us to keep the mandate?
Well, obviously that's a political question.
Right,
but let's try and get
taking sides, but yeah.
Let's try and get the pro and the con here. In the case of the pro, the issue is to include it and find some way to fix the 30%, 33% or so of people who have a problem with the cost of it. Okay, they may not be eligible for some of the subsidies. They may be working, they may not be eligible for some of the government assistance. So clearly there are some plan design issues that need to be offered that give some relief to people so that they're not. Now they are paying a tax penalty if they aren't included.
Right.
But the tax penalty is not tens of thousands of dollars. It's about $600. And so yes, there's an issue about whether you pay that penalty or not. That's a problem for about 1/3 of the people. And so clearly that's one issue that has to be addressed. If you believe and you follow with the argument that everybody has to be part of it, as you would in any insurance program.
Right.
On the other side, on the con side, there's the concern that This is government intrusion, and government is taking care of people with regard to health care when in fact that was not supposed to be one of the standards that, at least on the Republican or the conservative side, the government was supposed to be involved with. Well, if you do that, then the concern is, how are you going to ensure that people who don't have insurance don't become a burden on the total population by going to the hospital and hospital incurring bad debt, taking care of them, dealing with emergency rooms, doctors, and otherwise, where people don't have insurance and you're trying to address that. That's the problem. And clearly, the issue has to deal with, to one extent, benefit design on the lower end. That's why they're in the Affordable Care Act, there's 3 different models in order to address the lower cost ones. In non-Affordable Care Act,
Right.
For example, in Medicare Part D with regard to drugs, there is special allowance for people who are below the federal poverty line. And just for everybody's argument,
Right.
The average income in the United States is somewhere around $59,000 today. So if that's the middle income, the question is, what's the federal poverty level? It's somewhere around $12,000, and then another 34% or 50% above that is where these people are and what you have to do to take care of them. Then you deal with the gap between about $15,000, $16,000 and more in order to make sure that those people can afford it. That's the con argument. The pro argument is you've got to have everybody fix what goes on. So without taking a political stance, that's where this issue occurs. Now, in the tax bill, part of the tax bill was supposed to be paid for by relief or repeal and replace of the Affordable Care Act, because that would pay to an extent for a lot of these tax relief issues. But since it wasn't repealed and replaced, now you still have the issue about how are you going to pay for it, not increase the deficits and everything, so that our kids and grandkids are having to pay for us having lower rates today.
Right. It's interesting. And so the ACA doesn't account for the federal poverty limit at all right now, or
it does.
It does. Okay.
It does. People that are below 134%, et cetera, the federal poverty level get subsidies.
Oh, right.
In order to help pay for
before, didn't they?
They had it to some extent under Medicare Part D.
Right.
But this is including everybody, people that work, people that may not be eligible for Medicare or Medi-Cal in California, Medicaid in other states. This is to try and give relief to everyone in order to make sure that the burden wasn't there. Because don't forget, before 2008, the cost of insurance was increasing. The number of people that had in deaths, in disease burden, in emergency rooms, in length of stay in hospitals was all increasing, and it was out of sight with regard to that. The Affordable Care Act improved it. The number of ER admits fell, the average day supply fell, issues with regard to overall costs fell, et cetera. But clearly, there was still about a third of the population that was a problem. And now the question was, what are you going to do about that? And that's where we're at, and where the political gamesmanship going back and forth is addressing.
Right. So say that we already know that the tax bill passed the House, and now it's in the Senate's hands. Say they do pass that bill that repeals the individual mandate for the ACA. How would that impact healthcare right now?
Well, what would happen is that and the American Hospital Association, the AMA, and other major organizations are all against it, because what would happen would be they would be getting all of these people coming back in, the same as it was before 2008, where they're all coming in for emergency care, regular care, hospital care, but they wouldn't have insurance. And so now the question would be, how are you going to pay for them? How are you going to address it? And that means younger people who presumably are supposed to be okay and not a problem, which historically was a true statement. But today, There's an increase in obesity that's on the rise across that. And by the way, it's not just the United States, it's across the world.
Yeah.
There's an increase as a result of that in microvascular disease or diabetes, cardiovascular disease, etc., going on. There's also additional costs of drugs that are going on, and a lot of the specialty drugs that are coming on that is increasing the cost. So the real issue then is, are we going back to the way it was before 2008, or is there some relief? And the relief on the con side has been that things will be cheaper, companies will have more money, they'll invest the money, they will increase the number of employed people, therefore people will have money, will be able to afford a plan of their choice. The problem is that premiums will all rise because of that.
Right.
And so as a result of that, will they be able to afford it? That's a question. In addition, the stock market has been going up, companies have been making money. There hasn't been a huge increase in the number of employed people that they've been hiring. They have been reinvesting their money, but it hasn't gone into a big investment. So the question will be, has that changed anything with regard to all these people being able to afford their health care? And the answer, at least by the professionals, is no.
So repealing the individual mandate isn't specifically getting rid of the ACA. It's just making it a non-issue and hoping it dies off by itself.
Yes.
Interesting. So what are the options for Americans to have now when as far as this bill is in process of going to the Senate? I don't know how fast it's going to get to the Senate, but what are some of the options the Americans can do in the meantime?
Well, the first thing is that people are signing up for the Affordable Care Act, not knowing what's going to happen. Uncertainty in healthcare is every bit as bad as uncertainty in the financial markets. People don't know what to do. Health plans don't know what to do. They're raising premiums because they don't know if they're going to get paid. The president said he won't pay them the subsidies that they're supposed to use in order to pay for these people that they've given care to.
Right.
So aside from all the political arguments, there's a major argument about what everybody's going to do. But people are signing up. They're signing up at a faster rate than they have in all of the past years for the Affordable Care Act. So that's one option.
Right.
And it isn't clear how long that will occur, but it's certainly one option. A second option is that people are going to have to take a look and decide how they want to select and pay for their health care for what they need. And they're going to have to be much better shoppers.
Yeah.
And they're going to have to be able to look at the marketplace and say, I don't need that, I'm not going to address it, or maybe it's something I can deal with in an over-the-counter type of product without having to deal with a prescription. Third option is that there's been a big move in retailization of healthcare, where there's these different clinics, minute clinics, and those that are in the pharmacies. So you can go have something taken care of, but it's one thing. They're not taking care of all your medical concerns. They're taking care of one medical concern. Right. You're going there to check your blood glucose. You're going there to check your blood pressure or whatever, or an infection or something like that. And so there has been a retailization that has dealt with these problems to try and do it. Those are 4 of the decisions. There are more, but it's going to require some work on the part of the state governments, the federal government, to give more options to people to be able to address that. Right now, the push is to give it to the states, but then money's going to be taken away from the states with issues with the taxes, where there won't be exemptions for having paid state, local, and county and taxes. So as a result of that, there'll be a question as to whether they can afford it. But clearly, those are issues legislatively that'll have to be looked at.
Right. Very interesting topic. And if you have any other comments or questions, then feel free to message. You can leave it down below. You can directly message us any way you want. We are off next week, obviously, and I hope you're off too. We're going to be stuffing our faces with turkey and ham and all kinds of stuffing. And make sure you have a great holiday. We'll be back the following week on Friday, every Friday at around noonish. And Em hasn't given me an exact time, huh? Anyways, please feel free to visit propharmaconsultants.com. We also have an RxInfoX page, which is a free information page that discusses everything healthcare and open what?
No, the open enrollment deadline is still December 15th.
Oh, and open enrollment deadline for the Affordable Care Act is December 15th. So make sure you go sign up. And we will see you in 2 weeks. Have a happy Thanksgiving.